Good morning, everybody. Eileen Magner here, welcoming you all to join us in Donegal. A lot of you are joining from County Donegal, but many more people joining us from the rest of the country as well. So on behalf of Donegal Local Enterprise Office and Donegal County Council, welcome to Beyond Brexit, Rising to the Challenge. Now, this is part of Local Enterprise Week, but it's also a follow-on to Are You Brexit Ready? Another webinar organised by Donegal Leo back in October. And this is another very valuable attempt by the office here to help people tackle the challenges. And I remember thinking last October when I heard all that really detailed information from the speakers on that day, just what an amount of work and what an amount of potential complications lay ahead of businesses in the wake of Brexit. So I really hope that people have been able to work their way through those. But I know that today is another great opportunity for you to learn from some of the great experts that Donegal Leo have lined up to help you through with this challenging time. Among our speakers today, we're going to be joined by Steve Marnahan. He's Managing Consultant with NITC, and he'll be chatting about the new landscape around European Brexit exports. We're going to be joined by Cathal Doherty here in Donegal, Nomanic Dairy Limited, and he'll be bringing the perspective of a company dealing with the post-Brexit challenges. We're also going to be joined by Ingrid De Duncan, CEO of Avail, and she'll be talking principally about supply chain and the challenges there. But we're going to begin with a man who is now really, I think everybody in the country knows him on first name terms because of the fantastic work he's been doing around Brexit. Our own Tony Connolly, Europe editor with RTE. He's put an incredible amount of work into this Brexit saga really since the very beginning. He even wrote a book at the very early stages, Brexit and Ireland, the dangers, the opportunities and the inside story of the Irish response. And that was shortlisted for the Irish Non-Fiction Book of the Year in 2017. Now, Tony, as you know, has been ahead of the posse in Europe, in the UK and here in Ireland on every development that we've had in relation to Brexit. And he's managed to unravel the most complex elements of the story to make it more understandable for all of us. I think Tony deserves a medal and a lot more for the work he's done in tackling this beast, and fantastic to have him here this morning joining us from Brussels to bring us up to speed on where we are today, the reality of Brexit in March 2021. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Eileen, and thanks for that very warm introduction. It's great to be part of this project, not just because the work that I do is really to try and break down complex issues for people who watch RTE News or listen to the radio or read the RTE website. But it's one of those rare stories where the work that you do has, real world implications and consequences for people on the ground. And obviously people joining this webinar today are facing really challenging times with Brexit. And so I'm delighted to think that the work that I do helps people understand the complexities of Brexit. And it does seem a bit surprising that it's 4 years now since the book came out, trying to anticipate what Brexit would mean. But now Brexit has happened and it's real. I'll try now to set out the political context of Brexit now that it has happened, and what other changes might be coming down the tracks, and what the relationship between the EU and UK is going to be in the future. And of course, that's not an abstract thing for ordinary people working in Donegal or across Ireland. It has real world consequences because principally of the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Irish border question, as you know, surprisingly defined and shaped a lot of how Brexit happened. I don't think anybody could have predicted that, but the Irish border has been at the centre of Britain's departure from the European Union, and it is still at the centre of Britain's future relationship with the EU. So how that relationship evolves will have an impact on Ireland, but also the reality of the Irish Protocol will have an impact on how that relationship evolves as well. So it's kind of a two-way relationship. So as you know, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, the Future Relationship Treaty, was concluded between the UK and the EU on Christmas Eve. I remember that day very well. Because I had to spend Christmas in Brussels because of the restrictions. I'd normally go back to Derry for Christmas, but we were trying to have a Christmas dinner on Christmas Eve, which of course is the European way. And I was trying to chop vegetables and make soup while doing one interview after another with the BBC and other outlets, and of course RTE. But anyway, they got the deal over the line on Christmas Eve around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, this is a straightforward free trade agreement, zero tariffs, zero quotas. It's been called a bare bones free trade agreement. It didn't have the ambition that Theresa May have aspired towards when she was Prime Minister. And it was really constrained by the UK's fixation with sovereignty and a very kind of pure notion of sovereignty. So that meant that they didn't want to be in any way aligned with EU regulations. They didn't want to be in any way subject to the European Court of Justice and the reach of the European Commission. So that means a much more arm's length relationship. So yes, there's going to be no tariffs on goods by and large. There won't be any quota on goods by and large. But there isn't a huge amount there to cheer if you're in the services sector. And of course, once you drill down into the detail of the free trade agreement, you discover that there is a rules of origin implication there. How much of what you make originates in your own country and how much of it comes from somewhere else. Now, if you're using inputs from the UK, then and vice versa, if UK manufacturers are using inputs from the EU, then by and large, that accumulation, as it's called, will still be permitted. However, if you're using inputs or raw materials or ingredients from elsewhere around the world, then things start to get complicated. I'll get into that in a bit more detail in a moment, but just to set up at the moment the political, I suppose, temperature between Britain and Europe and how that is going to feed into what this future relationship is going to look like. As you know, we've had a fairly torrid few weeks from the beginning of January. I suppose there was a sudden realization in the UK of the complexity of Brexit. Suddenly, companies were discovering that life was not as it was before. There was a huge avalanche of bureaucracy when trading into the European Union, including trading into Ireland. There were major problems hitting shellfish producers, fish producers, especially in Scotland. The whole SPS, food safety, agri-food spectrum was a very acute recognition for people about how difficult life could be under Brexit. Then we had disputes that arose between the UK and the EU over the embassy issue in London. Would the EU ambassador to the UK be given full diplomatic rights and privileges? That's still to be resolved. There are now some restrictions on the UK's ambassador to the EU about his access to members of the EU institutions. And then, of course, we had the Northern Ireland Protocol blowing up on the 29th of January, and that set in motion a really difficult period of time in terms of how the Northern Ireland Protocol is going to be managed. I think we've tried to, or both sides have tried to calm tensions there to an extent. The issue of the protocol is now back in what we call process. That means committee meetings, meetings of the Joint Committee, meetings of the Specialised Committee. These are bodies which implement and help to implement the Northern Ireland Protocol. But I think there is still the potential for more crises to erupt in the relationship between the UK and the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, in terms of personnel, we know that David Frost, who was the chief Brexit negotiator. He has been appointed as the main person to manage the relationship between the UK and the European Union going forward. He, of course, was part of the free trade agreement. He was the chief negotiator, and he's seen as one of the true believers in British sovereignty, and perhaps takes a hard line on Brexit. But at the same time, he does have a direct line to Boris Johnson. So he has tremendous influence in this relationship. So that is the way that this new relationship is going to be managed. He will be on the UK side, working with Maroš Šefčovič on the EU side on two different bodies. One is the Joint Partnership Council, which basically manages the future trade relationship, and the other is the Joint Committee, which manages the outgoing withdrawal agreement, including the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, because of the difficulties we've had in the relationship so far in the first couple of months of this year, especially over the Northern Ireland Protocol, over some of the other disagreements which have arisen, the EU is looking at the idea of a grand reset around the end of April. And that's because the free trade agreement, the TCA as it's called, is going to be formally ratified by the European Parliament on the 24th of March. And then it will be fully and formally adopted by member states in April. And the idea is that you might have some kind of handshake moment at the end of April. And you would also have a package of solutions and agreements between both sides that would kind of tie up the loose ends around the Northern Ireland Protocol, the embassy in London, and so on, and to try to shift the relationship into a more harmonious era. That's certainly the wish of senior people in the European Commission, and it's not clear if the UK is going to sign up to that idea. Some people think that a relationship of permanent tension delivers ongoing political benefits to Boris Johnson from Conservative voters, from members of the Conservative Party, and they might prefer to keep that edgy relationship there. For the people operating in Ireland, companies exporting to the UK, aside from how that relationship is going to unfold over time, the big issue coming up is on the 1st of April, we're going to see the first of the big set of checks and controls being applied by the UK on their ports and on their borders. So that means for agri-food products going to the UK, whereas those formalities have been waived for the first couple of months, they will come into effect on the 1st of April. And I think some of the speakers may be getting into that in more detail. So that means getting for Irish exporters, Donegal exporters of agri-food products to the UK will have to register with DEFRA. They will have to become familiar and compliant with health certificates for food products and products of animal origin going into the UK, just in the same way that UK products will have had to comply with those formalities when they're sending goods to Ireland and to the rest of the European Union. Then on the 1st of July, we're going to have the second full application of checks and controls by the UK on their borders, and that is going to be the full slate of customs formalities. And again, this is going to be a fairly momentous and I'd say very challenging milestone for Irish companies, for companies in Donegal, because you will have to be familiar with customs declarations. There will be requirements to have perhaps an established position in the UK, or to have a customs agent, or to use haulage companies to create that establishment in the UK, which will make those exports to the UK possible. Again, we may have other experts talking about that during today's webinar. But Beyond that, as I mentioned at the start, the Northern Ireland question still has the potential to shape and determine the relationship between the EU and the UK going forward. And one of the areas that people are looking at is a potential veterinary agreement between the UK and the EU. This would be a bilateral agreement that would kind of sit on top the free trade agreement. And in the context of the Northern Ireland Protocol, we've seen how difficult it has been for GB companies to export food products or animal origin products into Northern Ireland, how expensive that is, how the grace periods that were agreed in December are not necessarily long enough. The UK wants those grace periods to be extended. That is to provide some kind of holistic system that would facilitate bringing food products into Northern Ireland from Great Britain. And one suggestion is that a bilateral veterinary agreement might make that whole system and whole process easier. Now, again, this is fraught with political difficulty because the kinds of bilateral veterinary models that we've been talking about behind the scenes are either the Swiss model, which effectively requires Switzerland to swallow whole most of the EU's rules on animal health and food safety, or the New Zealand model, which is a much more arm's length agreement. So the EU-New Zealand veterinary agreement does diminish the degree of friction when New Zealand sends food products, especially lamb, to the European Union, but it doesn't do away with friction altogether. So the question is, will both sides be able to go for one or other of those models, or will they have to find some way of getting a compromise in between? And I think that would take time, but my understanding is that officials in the European Commission are exploring this idea. There have been some tentative discussions with the UK side on this, but it is very political. But I suppose if you want to take a long view, if they do get a veterinary agreement that alleviates a lot of the friction on the Irish Sea, then by extension, that would be good news for Irish companies exporting agri-food or animal derived products, dairy products, and so on to the UK in the future. So a lot of that will depend on, again, this personal relationship between David Frost and Maros Šefčovič, his opposite number, and whether or not they can do some kind of reset in April and provide the kind of atmosphere and the atmospherics for a better long-term relationship between both sides. And of course, all of that will have a bearing on how ordinary people, how ordinary businesses, SMEs, and so on can continue to export into the UK market and so on. Beyond that, there is the wider question of how Irish companies can access the EU market as a whole, and we've seen the challenges that have confronted exporters on the land bridge, the UK land bridge. We've seen the opening up of more ferry routes from Ireland direct to the continental mainland. I think that's going to continue, but there may be challenges down the tracks there as well. But overall, I think this is going to be a long journey and a difficult one, and one that is still going to be political and will still evolve, even though the free trade agreements, the trade and cooperation agreement, was concluded on the 24th of December. And that is now in situ, that is in place, and will have to be managed. And just a final word on that, the management of that free trade agreement is going to be complex and very cumbersome. You will have something like 19 subcommittees working under this joint partnership council that will be co-chaired by David Frost and Maros Šefčovič. And each of those committees will have senior European Commission figures deeply involved. I mean, the UK is a huge economy. It's not going to be drifting off into middle distance. They're still going to have to interact with each other. And this is going to be a difficult and long-term bilateral management issue with very complex structures. And I suppose people will hope that those structures bed down and the politics of this become a little bit more harmonious and less toxic than perhaps we've seen in the past couple of weeks. So I think that's a good place to just have a pause there, and then I'm happy to take any questions on this ongoing relationship. Thank you.
Tony, thanks a million. And I think we're going to have the questions a bit later on, but that was a terrific insight into the ongoing drama in Europe and how relationships are going to influence how things work out as time moves on, and what's coming down the tracks, the challenges and the potential for more crises. And in terms of businesses, you know, the devil is in the detail, as they say, and there is no doubt that there'll be more issues for people to deal with in terms of customs and controls. And our next speaker may delve into that area a little bit more. He's also joining us from Europe, from Holland. Our next speaker is Steve Marnahan. Now, he's the founder and managing consultant with NITC. And Steve's been operating in Europe for about 30 years now, helping Irish SMEs to develop their export business right across Europe as far as Russia. And he's going to give us some insights now into how Brexit is working out from an exporter's point of view, and how to adapt to the new Brexit reality. Steve Marnahan.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can share my screen. Unlike Tony, even though I'm 200 kilometres up the road, I don't have the same level of media training as Tony does, so I'll rely on some slides to take you through the presentation. Tony, fantastic. Thanks for the political perspective and looking forwards. From my perspective, I'm going to look at it very much from the mainland European perspective. As Eileen says, I've been based in Amsterdam for the last 30 years and assisting companies from Ireland into the European markets. That originally started in the Benelux, and since then we've moved into the Nordics, Western Europe, Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Central Eastern Europe, Poland, Czech Republic. We've also undertaken projects in Russia. So we have local consultants with their local networks and local skills in each of those markets. That's probably enough about NITC. Interestingly, the illustration I've put up in front of you goes back to 1993, would you believe, in an Irish pub when I was setting up my business, not quite in the Irish pub, but I asked a local artist to draw what I was trying to set out to do, which was to help Irish companies from 1993 into the European market using the Benelux as the gateway to Europe. And if you look at the way the causeway, I had it re-illustrated last year, but if you look at the way the causeway cuts across the GB, it's never been as topical. So what I'm going to go through this morning is literally just to go through some key terms. What has really changed between Ireland and Europe, mainland Europe, over the last couple of months? The experience that we've had in January, February, working very much hands-on with Irish exporters, both north and south, and what we've come up against, and a number of things that Tony has already mentioned. But I think the whole idea about beyond Brexit and rising to the challenge, which is the focus of today, is what are the opportunities in terms of export, in terms of import, again, with the focus on mainland Europe. And when is the right time, you know, when and why should you trade with the EU, those of you who are maybe not already doing it. A little bit, but I'm not going into depth because that's a separate presentation about how to assess and access new markets, which is, I know, is something that the local enterprise organisations in Donegal are very keen for you to look at as well. So let me just put up the first sort of key terms here. This slide may look very chaotic to you with all those different words which we've been faced with over the last number of months, but I can tell you it has been chaotic. And I think it's sometimes difficult to decipher whether it has come through Brexit and the lack of time to implement and new red tape, or whether it has partially got to do with Corona and dealing with a global pandemic, and also the world economy and the state that it's in at the moment. And there are challenges for you, for those of you who are doing business intercontinental, the container prices, for example, materials price increases. I think we are absolutely in the middle of a perfect storm. That's the way I see it. So hopefully that slide describes it slightly. There's things that have changed and maybe haven't changed. Obviously, and I am simplifying things, is Ireland's location physically and Europe's location physically. We haven't got any further away from each other. Those of us who have been building bridges and building relationships between Ireland and Europe over the last number of years, Ireland's reputation as a partner, as a supplier, has not changed. And again, we also have the benefits of it always being a euro market, as opposed to dealing with a foreign currency on a day and daily basis, which is sterling. And those partnerships which have developed over the years by Irish companies into Europe, they are still set in stone in many cases. I think there are certain things that have changed, and the free trade agreement and duty rates, for example, yes, there will be some extra paperwork in terms of the rules of origin and the health certificates. I think there has been a huge lack of understanding, and that's just not on the Irish side, but it's on the GB side and it's on the European side as well. But I don't think that's surprising realistically, given the timeline that we were given and the challenges that businesses are being faced with. There's a lot of good news coverage out there. There's obviously a lot of headline grabbers as well in terms of specific situations. We're quite close to the ground in terms of working with exporters on a day and daily basis. And realistically, for the large or the internationally focused companies who are used to working with export documentation, probably very little has changed because they understood and do understand what is required, so little has changed. I think the group that's been hit probably most are the smaller exporters, those that maybe aren't sending full container loads, but working with groupage, sharing trailers, for example, driver accompanied, some of the food companies, for example. There has been some change, and that's something that we're trying to get around. In terms of aspirant exporters or new to exporters, actually little has changed because you're pre-export. So the question there remains, when is the right time to start exporting? And we'll come to that slightly later. What has changed for the Europeans from the 1st of January? We're dealing, for example, here in Amsterdam with Dutch supermarkets, for example, on behalf of our clients and also the partners who are supplying into them. And we were warned, we were informed last year that the supermarkets wouldn't accept extra paperwork, extra cost, delays. In fact, Albert Heijn has added into their new contracts from the 1st of January that there will be penalties for out of stock. So despite there being an understanding, there isn't really an understanding because the agreed terms, the deliveries, for example, should take place as previously arranged. Now, that gives us plenty of challenges. And I do feel there is a bit of nervousness and loss of confidence because I think there's a lack of understanding on a European level about GB, NI and Ireland and what the implications are going to be in terms of doing business. I've sat in on some Dutch government webinars as well, where they're explaining the terms to their exporters, and it has become very complicated as well. In terms of Dutch, those are Dutch customers. In terms of Dutch exporters, they can turn their direction. So if they were exporting to GB or to Ireland, obviously in terms of their location, they can look to diversify into other markets. And they have Brexit vouchers, for example, from the Dutch government to assist them into those marketplaces as well. I think what we are seeing, and Tony alluded to it earlier on, is that there are new routes which have been developed by the ferry companies, for example, into the French market and the Spanish market, into Belgium, direct routes, for example, to bypass land bridge. So I think that from the Dutch perspective, they may lose that title of gateway to Europe because obviously their proximity to the GB market and to land bridge, which, as we all know, is the shortest route, certainly from getting from Donegal into the hinterland of Europe. But the Dutch have also gained on inward investment. I think there were some 180 projects of companies from GB or UK who have invested in the Dutch market over the last number of years. And I think we've read recently about the changes to banking and trading to the loss of the City of London. You've also got the EMA, European Medical Authority, which was rehoused to Amsterdam a couple of years ago as well. So what else has changed for Europeans? I said I sat in a couple of seminars, for example, at Aalsmeer Flower Auction here around the corner, where they would prepare bouquets of cut flowers for the supermarkets in the UK. There were questions coming in on that webinar about, I have 10 stems of Dutch flowers, I have 5 stems from Kenya, and I have 5 stems from Ethiopia. There's substantial processing going on because I'm actually cutting the flower, packing it, wrapping it, adding value to it. How do you deal with the duty on that? And there was a whole explanation about the fact that Kenya and Ethiopia have trade arrangements and duty arrangements with the UK, but there are separate arrangements with the EU. So there was unfortunately no answer given on that particular webinar. What we've also heard is that the Dutch customs, their paperwork will increase from 30 million documents per year up to 500 million customs declarations. So there's a huge impact there in terms of how that's all going to be processed. Even Dutch companies who are well organized, who are shipping to GB, for example, quotas have been put. There's a Camera Express chain which sells cameras, obviously. They have a web shop, they sell into GB. They've been limited by their transporter, their couriers, to 80 shipments per day, something they really hadn't expected. But then they also have to look at what happens with samples, what happens to returns, for example. So there's a lot of new processes which have to be taken into account there as well. I think one of the things where we do start to see opportunities is the fact that companies in Europe see GB as being the route to Ireland. So a lot of the contracts that European companies would have for the Irish marketplace would be via a partner in the UK or GB. I think that's something where, with negotiation, we're doing one at the moment, for example, on condensed milk, which was previously sourced in GB, but our client has asked us to resource that product, obviously a topic that Ingrid will come on to later on, from the German market, and that it would bypass Landbridge and go straight from Dunkirk to Rosslare, for example, or one of the other ferry routes. So this company, the German supplier, the German dairy, would have had arrangements in the GB and Irish market, but they are prepared to break open those arrangements if they know that the customer in Ireland is of the right size for them as well. So those are some of the things that I do think have changed. What have we experienced? Well, the flash there, the shock of January and February, and the dust is still settling. So from day one, instead of our 36-hour day one for day 3 delivery, for example, from the north of Ireland or anywhere in Ireland, is becoming 63 hours. So instead of going across to Fleetwood or going across to Holyhead and going from Harwich to Hook, we're finding that our transporters, our hauliers, especially the Group H hauliers, are going on a longer route. So it's a longer sailing, it's a longer driving time, which means that we have some of our clients have been missing their delivery slots into their customers. So in that way, it gives us less flexibility. Instead of going out 4 or 5 days a week, we are having to reschedule based on the ferry sailings. What has changed is that we have come back to all the consignee paperwork being in order using the T2s. So the haulier still has the option of whether he goes across Landbridge or whether he goes on the longboat. But he obviously has to make sure, as the haulier, you're down to the weakest link, that everybody's paperwork needs to be in order, and that's something they have taken on themselves as well. One of the things that Irish, especially food companies, have a good reputation for is small minimum order quantities, short turnaround times. So we would receive an order on a Monday before 10 o'clock in the morning, produced Monday, out Monday night, delivery in the Netherlands first thing Wednesday morning. And that's something that's been really challenged at the moment due to the longer boats. So there is turbulence in the market. There's no two doubts about that as well. It's very important. A lot of the things that we've been doing is managing the relationships. So communicating with the exporters, with the customers, making sure they understand the implications of what's going on. And there has been a huge reduction in terms of the volumes coming in from GB to the Netherlands in the first couple of months. It could well be that companies were well stocked up before the end of the year. And what you're also seeing is that European haulage companies are less keen to deliver into GB and Ireland because they're not getting the backloads. Haulage, as you know, has to work both ways, so that is pushing up the costs. And there have been on the Dutch side as well plenty of press coverage in terms of the post-Brexit situation. We have resourced flour, for example, which was previously from GB into Ireland to Rotterdam. We have clients who work in the data center industry who've had real problems in terms of getting equipment onto site, especially from GB suppliers into Europe, and also men traveling specifically on British passports who weren't previously working on projects, but who've started working on projects since the 1st of January. So that's not to mention the corona testing of drivers, which has come in amongst all that as well. So it has been quite a challenging start to the year. The Irish ambassador here in the Netherlands wondered what his predecessor, what kept his predecessor busy before Brexit. But I think with the combination of Brexit and Corona, the ambassador's work is cut out. Is it going to get easier? Probably not. So I think it is time that we have to adapt and rise to the challenge. Can we do it? Yes, I think we can. I know we can, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take frustration. And it's going to take some extra cost as well. There are different ways of looking at it. One of our clients is on the acquisition trail at the moment. So we're looking at acquisitions for him in Germany, in France, in Spain, and in Czech Republic and Slovakia. But obviously that's a company of a certain size who sees that as being one of his routes to market. So the new challenges of for exporting to the EU. As Tony said earlier on, we need to make sure that the goods qualify for the 0% rate. We have to understand the preferential rules of origin. You have to become registered through REX as a registered exporter. I think that's for shipments over €6,000. It's very important to have good communication with your haulier as well, because the ferries are working with slots. In the first weeks of the Rosslare, the boat to Dunkirk, for example, there's 120 capacity on the boat, and I think they had 96 overbookings on 120. So there's challenges on that as well. So we have to adjust to the new processes, and obviously there are going to be some continuing delays. I think, though, Thomas Byrne, the Minister of State for European Affairs in Ireland, has said there has been little or no disruption, though, between direct trade between the EU and Ireland. And I think that is important to know. Most trucks are completing their paperwork before they're moving their goods. They're being green lighted to leave the ports without checks. As I said earlier on, we are actually working with the Donegal Dairy, not Nomadic, who are speaking later on by chance, but we are selling ingredients into the Dutch marketplace. And what we have had to do is then to make sure the forms, to make sure the paperwork is all in order, that our haulier can either choose to go land bridge, the shortest route, or whether he goes on the longboat through Rosslare. He decides on the route, but we have to inform the client. And we have some leeway on that particular product because it's got a longer shelf life. Some of the shelf lives we're working with are 14 days. So literally every second, every minute counts. So I alluded earlier on, what do I see happening in terms of the market? I do believe that there is a shift away from Asian production. The container prices, which have risen from maybe $1,800 to $1,200 at the highest end, have really shocked a lot of people who have production. So I do think there will be a return to close to shore production. And again, I think this is an area where Ingrid will probably cover later on. Companies, given the turbulence and the insecurity in the market at the moment, are looking for low minimum order quantities. So where Irish companies, especially family businesses, have had a real forte is not like German companies will turn down orders of a certain volume if it doesn't suit their capacity. Irish companies have always played very strongly in there and have shown people that they have that can-do attitude and they will accept those lower MOQs to get into the marketplace as well. So I think flexibility, I think short lead times will be something that I would be promoting in terms of our Irish clients into the European markets as well as the fact that EU companies are dual sourcing at the moment and resourcing suppliers either away from GB or from further afield markets. Given what's happening with container prices. So I do think there's an opportunity to break open GB supply contracts into GB&I. But I think the opportunities are sector dependent. Let me explain that. We have been successful over the last number of months still in facilitating meetings with our clients in various European countries, but it does depend very much on the sector. So, for example, we've done a Nordic project recently on medical devices. There was, I suppose, a Corona link to that, so it was very much in demand. But we were able to set up 13 meetings with distributors across various Nordic markets. We've also done a project in engineered products to Spain. Again, no issues. Building materials into France. We did have a project last year in gym equipment, and we set up distributors in the Dutch marketplace. Those are still in place, but because gyms have closed, it has been difficult to move with those distributorships. Some of the areas which are more difficult are, for example, a whiskey project into France, a water project into the Netherlands. Because the horeca, as we call it, the hotel, restaurant, and catering, has been closed for so many months, it's not an opportune moment necessarily to approach buyers with new ideas. So innovation is quite difficult to get across. We've actually been hand delivering samples to supermarket buyers' home addresses. That's the length that we have to go to get our products in front of them because they're all working from home. But I think what we have in Ireland is very clear: is we have that can-do attitude, and I think if we continue that, that we will succeed. So in summary, who will gain? As we've said, the ferry companies, the foreign investment agencies, companies who've already got a European network, and I think it's very important to have that network to rely on in a time of need. Companies who are well informed, companies whose goods originate in Ireland and the EU, and that you can prove your origins as well. But I think we all have to be on top of the regulations. This is not a better deal. It wasn't a better deal than we had before, so we have to address that as well. And some companies, I think, will take this as being the KITA. It'll be the kick to action to start looking further afield into European markets. I think there will be an opportunity to win new domestic business, especially where products have been coming in from GB. But I do also believe there's opportunity to win new export business and to win new import business. I think we're clear that it's been more difficult to get goods into Ireland than out of Ireland. So I think we can export, which brings me to the question. Well, there will be people obviously who will lose out. I think GB companies selling into Ireland, for example, GB hubs used for deliveries to Ireland, European companies who import from Asia, for example, and sell on to GB. But also smaller web shops, I think smaller companies and those with low value B2C products as well. We've all heard the stories about couriers turning up at our doors and slapping duty on particular goods. So I think I've 1 or 2 more minutes left, and I suppose just quickly to go through, when is a good moment? I think timing is everything, as you can see there at the bottom, to start trading with the EU. And I know that especially Michael and his team are very keen for companies in Donegal to look at trading and developing trading relationships. It all is about timing. Is Brexit the right moment? Well, that's something you know yourselves in terms of your own businesses. Do you know your market? Do you have well-developed distribution? Could you be working more in your domestic market, for example? Do you need to diversify away from GB due to Brexit? Is that giving you challenges which you may not have then going into Europe? And is internationalization of your business, is it the right option for your company? Do you have the resources organizationally in terms of product, pricing, capacity, finance? Is your business scalable? That's for another day, but just to plant that seed with you as to whether it's the right time. Do you have the commitment and the drive and the time and the investment required? And I know that there are various grants and subsidies available to get you into export markets. And I think it's important to be aware of those as well. We all hear of these international success stories of small companies. In fairness, we have worked with very many of them over the years. From, size really doesn't matter, and it is really, really great to see the accolades of small companies who can make it big in the European markets. Again, the benefits, the challenges, we all know them. I think the opportunity to diversify and spread risk and to innovate, increase your competitiveness. I think one of the big things is obviously not having the reliance on currency. It was down at 108 last year. It's up at 115, 116 today. We all have to try and manage currency within business as well. But I think one of the key things, one of the key challenges is market intelligence, having those contacts, getting in front of the right people. And that's an area where we could potentially help. It all starts with describing what you want to achieve. Exactly, which specific territory within Europe. There's not one European market. There's so many differences within the markets as well. What specific information do you require? Who is it you're looking to engage with? Do you want to sell directly, which takes time and effort, or will you sell through a partner? But I think you have to be realistic and develop a timeline. One of the areas we help clients with is this market selection process. We're working with a knitwear company at the moment, and obviously you might say, well, you go for the colder countries rather than warmer countries, but it's taking that map of Europe and based on data, based on intelligence, deciding. We all know how to eat an elephant, which is piece by piece. So it's a question of picking that right market and putting the time and effort into that particular market, scoping out the market, selecting it, for example, as well. Having the market research done, having the intelligence in terms of where do we go? How do we do it? How do we prospect? Do we have the language skills? Confirm the opportunity, and then assess and access the market. I've put a few asterisks in this particular one because of Corona. It has become less easy, but it's not impossible to visit the market. As I say, we're doing a lot of online calls at the moment as well. There are virtual trade missions. Whether they're successful or not, they're not just as good as a physical trade mission. How to meet new people from your industry, for example. I know a lot of people in export who have actually enjoyed the fact that they haven't had to travel as much, but I think deep down they would like to get back into it again, like we all would, and get into the European market. So there's no quick fix. I think we have to be realistic in terms of how long it takes to get into a market, and that's got to do with your timing in terms of when to approach any new market. And it all depends again then on the product, the sector. We've seen things happen very quickly, and we've also seen things which take quite some time before you break into a new market. What we would say, and I'll leave you with this thought, is the export strategy. It's all about focus. It's picking one particular market or two particular markets and channels and really working through and developing, market share. Develop the export template or the blueprint that you can use in new markets as well, and then develop one market at a time and just repeat it and repeat it. We have seen that with a number of our clients, and we have grown with them over the years. So I suppose in this particular week of looking at post-Brexit, the EU market is still there. So what's stopping you? NITC can help you. If you would like to be in contact with us through Seamus or through Ivan or through Michael, we'd love to have a conversation with you. And I suppose the question is, are you ready to rise to the challenge, which is the theme of Enterprise Week? Thank you very much for your time. And like all the panelists, we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Steve. That gave us a great insight into the chaos and the changes, the challenges, the mountain of paperwork. And it was really interesting to get an idea of the Dutch experience, what's happening there, even down to what's happening with a bunch of flowers. There's so many changes. As you said, it's all about time, it's about adjustment, but delighted that you ended on a positive note, that there are opportunities there. It's just a matter of thinking about it, the can-do attitude, and go for it. Now, there's a lot to digest there between Steve and Tony, so we're going to take a quick break. Give us 10 minutes. Join us back at 11 o'clock, please. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us again after our little break. And now we're going directly to the coalface of the Brexit reality for SMEs. And we're joined by Cathal Doherty. He's the head of finance and supply chain with Nomanic Dairy Limited, just up the road here at Crossroads, Killygordon in Donegal, producing a range of yoghurt products, single serve, food to go ranges. And they've a big stake in the UK market. 85% of their sales are to mainland UK, but they're undaunted by Brexit and they're determined to deliver on their vision, which is to continue to double in size every 5 years. So now Cathal is going to let us in on how Nomadic is facing up to the challenge of the reality of post-Brexit exports.
Thanks, Eileen. Okay, listen, I'm delighted to speak with you today. The purpose of my talk will be, as Eileen said, was just to give you our company perspective on the challenges, the impacts, and maybe some of the actions we've taken in response to the new trading relationship beyond Brexit. Make no mistake about it, Brexit is daunting. It is an unmitigated disaster. I like to think of it as, I don't know, the British government having won the Brexit issue like a rented tuxedo, have left their businesses and their trading partners with the dry cleaning bill. But before we get into what the dry cleaning bill looks like, I would like to introduce you to Nomanic Dairy. So who are we? As you can see, we are a devilishly handsome lot, but primarily we are small but mighty creamery based in beautiful Donegal, with some 400 plus miles and a body of water and a border, and now a new border between us and our major customers on the UK mainland. We have been operating from what most of our viewers would most likely know as the Donegal Creameries milk plants in Killygordon for over 22 years now. We share the site now with Arrigo, but we continue to be owned by the old Donegal Creameries PLC group, now known as Donegal Investment Group PLC. And what we're most proud of, obviously, is to be able to employ upwards of 60 people from primarily the local area, and we value greatly, the small part that we play in supporting the local community and the many milk producers of Donegal. So, what do we do? Well, we take great care to make great yogurt from the best milk in the world. We then take that sumptuous yogurt, we combine it with oats, fruit, never anything artificial, package it in various food-to-go, take-home solutions, all in an effort to bring great tasting, nutritious food to what we term as busy balancers. A noble endeavour, and one that particularly resonates with my wife and I, as we do our best to balance the demands of 7 children, a dog, a cat, and several goldfish. So I've briefly told you, who we are, what we do, but the real question is why. Why do we do what we do? As Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." And how, in this instance, how do we continue to operate in a post-Brexit environment? Hopefully, following in-house video featuring some very talented Nomadic Dairy employees and equally talented cows should serve to give you a sense of our why.
This is the story of what happens when big dreamers from the middle of nowhere decide to go their own way.
How's it going?
This is the story of Nomadic. Makers of yogurt the old-fashioned way for over 20 years.
Life moves fierce fast. And when you're not in balance, things can go a little pear-shaped. That's why we believe in balance.
It's a great antidote to our plugged-in lives. We believe balance feeds a life well lived. That's why we make our lovely live yogurt from fresh milk, nourished by the lush green pastures of Donegal.
Well, if you're gonna have yogurt, what do you want it to be from here? We have the wild Atlantic on our coast, and we're amongst the traditional dairy farms of County Donegal. Isn't that right, Patrick?
Hi.
So that means lots of this. This!
and a few of these lovely creatures.
And we only make in traditional small batches. Sure, what's the rush? We take our time to get our original taste and texture just right. Then we add real fruit, and sometimes oats, to make food that tastes great and is inherently healthy. What a great way to help you find a little balance in your busy day.
Nomadic. Go your own way.
So there you have it. That's Nomadic. If you enjoyed that, it's a bit of a respite from the slides. But anyway, so listen, what does Brexit mean? I'm actually reminded of a book by Stephen M. Covey. It was one of those, once you put it down, you can't pick it up kind of books. But what I did take from it was the truth that as trust goes down, the speed of the transaction goes down, and the cost of the transaction goes up. Well, trust is definitely down as a result of Brexit. We now have two trading partners who can make up their own rules. Can you imagine playing cards with somebody who's making up their own rules? Would you trust them? Would you need to be constantly checking the cards and what's up their sleeves? The game would be significantly slower, and the pot would be considerably smaller. That is what Brexit means. We went from a high trust, free-flowing trade relationship between the UK and Europe. That is crucial to a company such as Nomanic Dairy, which, as Eileen said, we do 85% of our sales, as well as a significant portion of our raw materials from the UK. So what if the speed of the transaction goes down? Well, Nomadic Dairy produce a fresh, chilled, short shelf life product. So the speed of the transaction is particularly important. Any delays in our supply chain resulting from customs inspections, pre-notification requirements, border delays will have a significant impact on or already squeezed short shelf life, increasing the likelihood of quality issues and waste across our supply chain. So what does it mean if the cost of the transaction goes up? Well, Nomadic Dairy, unfortunately, operate in an industry that enjoys single-digit profit margins. It's single digits for a reason. That reason being that it's a highly competitive industry with increasing competition and increasing power of retailers and a continuous requirement for innovation and development. And when you consider that our main competitors are UK-based producers who will not be subject to the same supply chain delays, increased costs, then that puts Nomadic Dairy, unfortunately, in a bit of a pinch. Our saving grace is that by virtue of the EU trade and cooperation agreement, we avoided the imposition of tariffs, which could have been north of, I think it was 8%. Again, a cost that our UK-based competitors would not have been subject to. So, it is worth bearing in mind, however, that this deal doesn't completely eliminate the possibility of tariffs in the future. Both sides will need to stay closely aligned, and if either side changes the rules too far, then the other side could impose tariffs. Trust is why programs such as the Trusted Trader or the Approved Economic Order Operator are so appealing, because they specifically try to increase trust, promising fewer checks, fewer controls, thus increasing the speed and lowering the cost of the movement. One of our early endeavours actually was to investigate AEO accreditation. We had secured funding, we had the consultant lined up, but then we realised just how difficult and drawing out the whole process would be, and decided that there wasn't a practical solution for us. But again, this proved to be the first of many Brexit-related rabbit holes that we would find ourselves down. Listen, we are no different to most businesses, and we're constantly having to adapt to an evolving marketplace, whilst at the same time constantly having to challenge, our operational capabilities and ways of working. We don't have time for Brexit. Let me just run through a list of some of the challenges that have been competing for our attention alongside Brexit. We've had the growing pains of a business that is doubling in size every 5 years. We just completed a major capital investment program, which in part involved taking an old factory out and putting a brand new factory in. We launched a brand new consumer pack, new shifts, and obviously a pandemic, which we lost 50% of our sales overnight. COVID response measures, and we're now embarking on an operational excellence program, which is going to change the structure, the methodology, the technological, and the technical capabilities of our business as we look to lay the foundation.
Cathal,
Yes.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you there. Just very briefly, there's just a little technical issue. Would you mind putting your screen into slideshow mode? I think you have it in speaker mode at the moment.
Speaker show.
Yeah, if you put it into slideshow mode, because people are getting we're getting your speaker notes as well.
Slideshow.
We want people to listen to you, Cathal, not read
I know,
your notes.
yeah.
So if you just kind of get rid of them. So
okay.
slideshow mode. Now, I'm no expert in this. This is what the techie people are telling me here to ask you to do. So hope you can...
Stop sharing, yes. Okay, one sec.
Huh? How are we?
Sorry about this.
You're all right. Technology
Yes.
is great when it works.
There we go. There we go.
There we go. Are we all right now?
How's that?
How's that, lads? That's perfect, Cathal.
Great.
Thank you very much. Sorry for interrupting.
Not at all. Thank you for putting me straight, Crikey. So, okay. Sorry, I've just taken you through some of the challenges we have, and again, this is on top of the usual 9-to-5 job of serving customers and making money. That also has to get done. Okay. Businesses have been heavily criticized for not being prepared, but you need to remember that this is a very difficult. It's very difficult to divert scarce resources to an issue that is poorly defined, where there are even doubts over whether the issue will happen at all, and if it does happen, nobody is in a position to explain the exact implications. Never mind how we go from solving them. Under these conditions, they don't have time for Brexit. Sentiment is perfectly understandable, and strategy, let's wait and see, seems perfectly reasonable. So Brexit, what did we know? After a number of come and gone Brexit dates, we finally had a hard and fast date. The 1st of January 2021, the transition period was going to end, and Mr. Johnson was committed to not seeking an extension. We also knew that the certainty of customs formalities would be unavoidable, and we knew that the tariffs were unfortunately a possibility. So what do we do ahead of January 1st, 2021 deadline? There was very little we could do about the imposition of tariffs on our exports into the UK. There was either going to be a free trade deal or there wasn't. Unfortunately, it's as simple as that. Swapping our UK suppliers for EU suppliers was not an option, as our main UK suppliers provide us with very bespoke flavors and ingredients, and we've previously tried and failed to replicate those. So our UK suppliers were hard and fast. They were set in stone for the time being. The one thing we could do was to avoid tariffs on our UK raw material imports. We could achieve this by securing inward processing for authorization. The lead time for IPR authorization was circa 6 months. Therefore, this is one of our first action items. And we, having gone through that process, what that application did do was introduce us at an early stage to our commodity codes. So what about customs formalities? Unlike tariffs, the imposition of customs formalities was a certainty. This was by definition unconscious incompetence, having no in-house customs experience or capability. So how do you even start to understand something where you don't even know what you don't know? What we did know was that we had a load sometimes to leaving Kerry-Gordon every day. And for the UK, we also knew that we had to do something about the customs agencies, estimated at the time at €120 per load. So not alone was the significant cost of using customs agents, we also had major concerns regarding the particular service sector's capability to deal with the unprecedented volume of customs documentations that were coming their way. You must remember this is a service sector that is operated 9 to 5, facing into providing a 24/7, 365 solution, and that a 5,000-fold increase in volume. We were determined, and therefore, we were determined to develop our own in-house customs capability. So where did we start? Well, we simply tried to make sense of the information that was available. UK revenue websites, we joined webinars, and we crucially took some customs training courses. It was on these training courses that we identified the software we needed to prepare our imports and export SADs, the process of completing 50 boxes on the import and export SADs gave us the questions that we needed to ask of ourselves and of our supply chain partners. For example, box 20, Incoterms, that taught us that we needed to clarify our Incoterms with our individual suppliers, the advice being to avoid X works. Boxes 2 through 14 taught us that not alone were we the EU exporter of record for our sales, but we were also the UK importer of record. That complicated things further and led us to understand that we needed both an EU and a UK ERI number. We needed a UK VAT number and a customs agent that's going to act for us on a direct representative basis. Box 44 taught us that we needed to figure out how we were going to prepare a commercial invoice and calculate the value on our finished goods. Box 16 forced us into understanding how we were going to establish and demonstrate the country of origin. We initially thought that the solution lay with the Chamber of Commerce, only to subsequently learn that it lay in our X number and a simple declaration on the commercial invoice. So we were slowly building the capability and the confidence required to bring our customs paperwork in-house. I'd say we were somewhere between conscious and confidence and conscious competence, which is a good enough place for us to start, to get started. Post-Brexit, so we're 2 months in. And so how are we operating? Well, initially we made sure that we carried enough stock of raw material into 2021 so that we wouldn't have to concern ourselves with the imports for the first 4 weeks post-Brexit. That gave us the capacity to concentrate our efforts in the first few weeks on successfully exporting our finished goods, and even then we only had to concern ourselves with the EU export side of the movement as the UK temporarily suspended customs formalities on the UK import side until April 1st. For raw materials, we had 3 or 4 UK to Ireland supplier movements a week, and as is common, most supply contracts for the Incoterms were delivered at place. This means that our suppliers look after the UK export paperwork, and we look after the customs formalities on the EU import side. A quick and cost-effective solution for us was to sign up with our suppliers' preferred agents, freight forwarders. That way, the movement could happen with very little intervention on our part. Our suppliers made the transport arrangement as before, supplying the customs agents freight forwarders with the requisite information to complete the UK export side. The customs agent freight forwarder could then take that information and complete the EU import side of the movement on our behalf, because they were also our customs agent. Easy, appears easy, and this, to be fair, this is working well. But we have, as a precaution from an MRP perspective, have increased the lead times on these supplies just to protect ourselves against delays. But as I say, it is working well. Very few delays to date. I do have a confession, however. When I said previously to avoid X works, please do as I say, not as I do. We have one supplier who accounts for maybe half of our raw material shipments each week, with whom we've had to continue to trade with on an X works basis. Not alone were we keen to retain the services of a local haulier, but our supplier was making it prohibitively expensive to change the terms on their supply contract. For this movement, we prepared the EU import customs paperwork in-house, which, to be fair, is a simple movement with only one commodity code. As this is a food product for human consumption, the difficulty lay in figuring out which of the state bodies required prior notification and in what shape or form that notification needed to be in. I remember we went around the house a bit on that, but eventually we figured out that a simple email to the Environmental Health Service was sufficient. So that's the raw material imports. On the export side, we have a lot more activity with a load possibly to leaving Kilgordon every day. This is where we could crucially see the greatest impact of cost increases and delays on our business. What we did know, however, was that the movement was the same every day. The same commodity codes, the same consignor and consignee, the same valuation calculations, the only change being the trailer number and the quantities, what's on the back of the trailer. So what we did was we simply let our customs agent do the first few movements. But for that, we did, however, have to suffer the delays and the midnight phone calls trying to get paperwork to a truck driver so they could board a ferry. The fears we had regarding the capacity of customs agents to deal with the sheer volume of work coming away was painfully evident, and that hardened our resolve to taking control, generating our own paperwork. So once we had a couple of export SADs done from the first few days of movement, we used them as a template to complete our own export SADs in house. To date, we've been subject to a couple of paperwork inspections by customs, but thankfully all has been present and correct, and we haven't experienced any delays. So, touch wood, I dare to say that our goods are moving, our exports are moving as smoothly as they were pre-Brexit. From the time production tells us what's on the lorry, we can prepare an export SAD, generate the commercial invoice, receive our routing from customers, generate a PBN, and send the driver off on his merry way down the road with all within 15 minutes. Brexit. Yeah, definitely not finished yet. I mean, Tony did speak of another evolving landscape, and so like the next hurdle for us is the 1st of April, which is when new rules for products of animal origin entering GB from the EU will come into effect. This basically means that each of our export loads or sales must now be accompanied with an export health certificate, and a pre-notification must be logged on the IPAS system, otherwise known as the Imported Products Animal Food and Feed System. This is the system used to notify the Animal and Plant Health Agency about imports from the EU, which is not to confuse with DEFRA, the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and separate to DERA, the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, and definitely nothing to do with our own Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. Confused yet? So that's just how that's an example of how confusing it can all get. So we have 3 questions we have in relation to the new rules. What does a health cert look like? How long does it take to get one? Remember, we have a load leaving every day, which requires an original export health certificate, not a copy, but an original, and it has to be signed by a vet. How is that going to work? We rang the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, who put us through to the milk dairy section, who tells us that they're going through a reorganisation, that they're working remotely, that the person we need to speak to is not in this particular day, and so on and so forth. I think we must be 3 or 4 phone calls in now. I still don't know whether it will take 1 or 5 days to receive an original health certificate. The questions don't end there. How do we request a health certificate? Do we make a request on traces, or is it on the dairy product certification system? What is traces? What is the dairy product certification system? I'm hoping all will be answered tomorrow as the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine is hosting a traces training webinar for their own staff, for the local authority vets, and for food business operators like ourselves. Can't contain my excitement on that one. Also, what's an export health cert going to cost if we need a vet to certify each load? That's not going to be cheap, and that's before we even consider the practicalities of getting a vet to come on site every day to certify our export load. Do we need to see the trailers? As for pre-notifying IPAS, it says on the HMR website that they need to be notified 1 working day before the consignment is due to arrive. Before we can even think about how we get access to IPAS, we need to figure out how we are supposed to give them 24-hour notice on a load that'll be at their border control post within 14 hours. Hopefully, the bilateral veterinary agreement that Tony spoke of earlier can get done, can be agreed. Where we are today, it's indicative of the Brexit process today. We're 4 weeks out from a deadline, and we have more questions than we do have answers at this stage. But take heart, the answers are there. The systems, the solutions exist, and as with January 1st, we will figure them out, and we will get through it. So, all I can say now is that's the end of my presentation. Hopefully, I've given you some sort of insight into what we've done, challenges that we face, questions that we have, the evolving landscape. So, maybe I'm sorry that my last slide was one of confusion. It does kind of echo the chaotic nature of the environment that Steve spoke of earlier. Steve was great in terms of he went from chaos to opportunity. So, I mean, what I had hoped was to leave you, positively enthused that there was little old Nomadic Dairy doing their own paperwork and just getting on with it. So I'll therefore leave you with this thought: everything is difficult before it gets easy. Just as Brexit is difficult now, it will become easy. Necessity, the mother of all invention, will ensure that businesses will thrive and prosper in the new Brexit environment. Thank you.
Cathal, you surely have given us a great insight, a great idea of the reality on the ground for a small business. And I love your directness and unmitigated disaster, you said from the start. But fair play to you for tackling the challenge head on and, dealing with the uncertainties, the costs, the questions, the midnight phone calls, all that sort of thing. And building up your own in-house customs capability was fantastic. So all I can say to you is the best of luck to your devilishly handsome team, your talented team and equally talented cows. I know you're going to take it on in the future and you'll deal no doubt head on again with the confusion and uncertainty. Best of luck to Nomadic. Now move on to our next speaker. And we're delighted to introduce a woman who's much sought after, a lecturer in 3 of our universities here in Ireland, top of her game in the area of strategic procurement. Ingrid De Duncan is CEO of IDEA, and they help people, companies to buy better, to achieve cost savings. And in her presentation, Ingrid is going to focus largely on a very critical area in the wake of Brexit, and that's supply chain. Over to you, Ingrid.
Thank you, Eileen, and can everybody hear me? Yeah? Yeah, everybody can hear me, which is great because I'm in West Cork and I greet you all, nearly 100 participants in the talk today. And if this was a version of Eurovision in Donegal, I would say 12 points to everybody that has gone before me. So without further ado, yes, Eileen, I'm going to probably take a more an eagle eye view and focus on supply chain and supply chain strategies as we all have them, how big or how small we are. As you said, my name is Ingrid De Duncan. I'm CEO of IDEA, and we help companies buy better. And that's a broad, although it's a very simple tag, it's a broad scope. And today I decided not to focus on the specific industries, but it was I was blown away with Cahill's presentation and his video of his team. Tunney is so skillful and knowledgeable about the political landscape and how it's a moving target. And then obviously Steve, he is at the forefront of it, moving and shaking from an export point of view and trying to do better for all the parties involved here in Ireland and in Holland. So I'm delighted to be part of the panel. But I'm going to take you back and focus your thoughts around, I suppose, the core elements from a supply chain point of view and show you the bigger picture, because sometimes we forget when we're into the weeds of it, we forget that actually one element impacts the next. And we as supply chain and procurement professionals are always tasked to make sure that goods and services arrive on time to our factory floor and that we ship out on time to our customers. Ultimately, what we're talking about is we're a chain of supply and demand, and we're a chain of people. And you might well know that sometimes it's a visible chain, but most of the time it's an invisible web of moving parts, information and money. And so in today's world, it's not an option anymore to not know where your products are coming from. It's not an option anymore not to know what the links are in your chain. Due to globalization and lean production, what we have done is in our production, we've orchestrated and fine-tuned everything to have the least waste or waiting time in our chain. And that works perfectly if all conditions are optimal. And what we would do as an effective, or to achieve an effective and efficient supply chain, is to optimize that flow from one link in the chain to the other, from the natural resources, from the raw material and all the components into the finished goods that is then delivered to the back end to your customer or the end user. And we're tasked to be lean, and we're tasked to operate the just-in-time approach, because time is money, inventory costs. It's about really organizing and maximizing the responsiveness and the efficiency of the goods. But what does that mean? What are the drivers of a certain and responsive business? And again, this is where I want to draw your eye back on how all-encompassing it can be. When we think about a full supply chain, we think about the interaction between logistics and cross-functional services. And as business owners, you know all very well how the fine-tuning of that interdependency really impacts the health and the growth of your business. And it's core to have the business in the first place. So a change in one of the drivers will impact positively or negatively on the others. So what are we talking about? We're talking about facilities. Two main types of facilities that we'd be talking about would be production site, storage site, or if they're on site or actually off site. When there's a change here, we impact inventory cost, but we also impact the transportation cost, and we might impact response time. Beyond facilities, we're looking at inventory, and inventory is held to, I suppose, reduce cost or increase the level of availability. Now, inventory also has a significant impact on the material flow and the time that is in the supply chain. And you might have different inventories or hubs breaking down your total inventory. Transportation, the logistics, it's so important to have a full supply chain from a logistics point of view, and it can take on many combinations of modes and routes. So transportation choices have a large impact also on your responsiveness and on your efficiency of your full supply chain. Now, this is my key one, my main one, information, because without information, we are nothing. Information is core because it actually indirectly impacts all the other drivers. And again, information is key. If we don't have it, we have no certainty in our supply chain. Sourcing, then, really, we're focusing on where who we select as a supplier and what they're going to do for us. But the efficiency there has more to do with the cost and the contract and making sure that we implement very efficiently the contract. And then finally, pricing. Obviously, pricing is determining how and what we're going to do and how we're going to impact the demand of our product. Again, this is core because ultimately this is how we make money. So those are the core drivers in any business. And I told you earlier that supply chain manages a visible and an invisible web of product, information, and money. And the visibility, again, the information side of things is for me key here to get your full supply chain map from cradle to grave. And again, yesterday we would have heard from Declan, it actually needs to be from cradle to cradle, and we're absolutely promoters of that as well. But let's just focus today on the linear slide that I have in front of you here. And reading this slide, we start from the right. So we as customers we actually will know who our first tier supplier is. We will put them in place. And when we work with clients on developing their supply chain strategy, we would ask our customers to start showing us their data, their information. So show us your contracts with your first tier suppliers. Show us as much as you can, all the way back through the source. And then let's see what is not there, because that currently is the problem, and that currently is the gap. When we are putting up a strategy for supply, we want to absolutely focus on the full visibility of the tier. And most of the time when we contract with the first tier, and we might actually organize the distribution and the transport ourselves, and we might then know where we pick it up, where we pick up the products. But beyond that, we might not have the full visibility of the components that go into the product. We might not have full visibility of the raw material. And the further the chain, the longer the chain goes, the less visible the information is. The further the information goes, it gets trickier. And the further the information goes, we have less control. When we contract out, we hope and we expect that supplier to make sure that throughout his own supply chain, all the links are strong. But if they're not, then that's where we have a problem. So we would stress test the chain and ask questions like your current suppliers. Who are your core suppliers, your strategic suppliers, the bottleneck, and the ones that really can do damage to your business when they're not there tomorrow anymore? And do you have contingent suppliers? Are there already alternative suppliers that you have selected, identified, contracted? Or is there a contingency plan? Because a lot of the time your competition already has done that. So you need to be aware how you can safeguard and how you can strengthen your current suppliers with an alternative supplier list. What's the dynamic in your market? It's another question. What is moving and shaking? What is going on? What are you seeing as barriers? Are there new entrants in the market? And it can be other countries, it can be other companies. What are substitutes? How is that impacting your competitiveness? Because ultimately you will have to get to a trigger point to say, okay, now it's impacting our profit. Now it's impacting our margin. Now we need to do something about it. So fully understanding the cost drivers and the trends that are impacting your business is core. Do you know, have you mapped through from start to finish your should cost model? What should the product that I buy costs from the supplier? Because when you do that, you will know exactly all the components of the cost. And do you see your total cost of ownership? What are the risks that you have seen? Have you already identified them? Have you assessed them? And have you actually prioritized them and put a contingency plan in place? So those would be the elements that we would see and do with customers when we want to strengthen, when we want to see the strength and the weakness in their supply chain and put a plan in place. Because ultimately, what happened was Brexit. Brexit happened, and Brexit has us spinning. It has us feeling confused and frustrated. And again, there's so much that has happened in the last 3 years, but there's so much unknown. And Tunney, I mean, in all of the knowledge and the work that Tunney has been doing, there's so many different moving targets that we really don't know. Beyond our 5 or 6 core drivers, it's cost, it's the hedging, it's the contracts, the customers, but also our own people. The IP, the intellectual property rights, legal availability, flexibility, quality, and ultimately what we don't know, we can't control. There's the fact as well, Brexit happened predominantly in Europe, and we in Ireland were mostly impacted. But ultimately, this was a ripple effect. it was a ripple effect across all the core drivers. It was a ripple effect across the whole of Europe. So all the unknowns, all the risks were compounded, and there was a huge ripple effect. I think Ireland, in the overall scheme of things, in comparison to Europe, really prepared well, but there's still so many unknowns. So we don't know. So we're feeling still confused, like Cathal said. We still don't know, and we're still spinning. And so what is the Brexit impact? I love this slide because it's very simple, right? Every interaction in the chain, internally with your other departments, with your business units, externally with your, excuse me, with your suppliers, it's about sharing and moving product, information, and finances. And what we need to do is about streamlining the flow and trying to take out the risks. Brexit has us dealing with the multitude of unknown, and our flexibility and predictability is completely disrupted. We're seeing cost increases, we have quality impacts, we have delays. Uncertainty is felt at the product level, uncertainty is felt at the information level and at the finance level. Not only is it also unrealistic to expect that we're going to go to a steady state very soon, because again, the fun only has started. The devil is in the detail, and per industry, per sector, there are, like Tony said, multiple work streams and committees that are only now getting into the detail of it. So movement of product has been impaired. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 days of delays in importing goods from the UK. There's a disrupted flow of information, and there's sometimes too much information, and we need to take out what is important to us. But changing declarations, changing standards, untested software around customs. A recent study really revealed that actually the biggest delay has to do with the administration, the additional paperwork that is being asked. And then we as logistics people, we're not trained into this new system, and your people might not be trained into your new system. So ultimately, we have a shortage of good, clear, not only resourced of people and knowledgeable people, but also we just, the systems aren't talking to each other yet. So if that wasn't enough, then there was Brexit. Then there was COVID. And struggling with supply chain disruption for Brexit was hard enough. So now COVID has just aggravated everything. And it's really the stress test that has caught most organizations by surprise, because there was very little time to prepare for COVID. It has exposed the underlying complexities and vulnerabilities of global supply chain, and it illustrates the importance of doing supply chain well. While Brexit is impacting predominantly Europe, COVID has blown all supply chain disruption out of the water for the whole world. And we're facing the same challenges and a little bit more, both from the buying side and the supply side. And if I give you some stats around how we as supply chain and procurement professionals had to deal with, 70% of organizations have said they had major disruption in planning. 74% of companies would have said there's a shortage of critical parts and delayed shipments and longer lead times. 69% have seen difficulties in our production because we can't scale up quickly enough or down or put on different production lines. Warehousing, distribution, they're all looking at difficulties of balancing the stock, and the demand has either fallen away or increased significantly. So the added complication of COVID may have had an additional negative impact on a lot of businesses, SMEs for sure, freelancers even. Still, as organizations now look to reorganize even our own working practices with remote workforces, flexibility, we could actually look at how can we, throughout all this disruption, look at how we can actually reorganize ourselves. And really it's about, this is a given. COVID is a given. Brexit is a given. There's so much we don't know. There's so much is out of control. But now it's about what we can control and what we can do to make sure that we actually safeguard our business and grow, like Cathal has outlined before. So what is our perfect balance between predictability of demand and our supply chain? Coming back to that uncertainty and the responsiveness, we're trying to balance it, and we need to do this through all the drivers of the supply chain, even though sometimes you might have a lot more impact in one than the others. So events such as Brexit and COVID and other black swan events, they just take away the certainties that businesses are built up. And it's the ripple effect that we're dealing with, that no contingency plan has ever catered for. And it, for some companies, it has turned into closing down businesses. So we need to deal with the lack of coordination, lack of information, lack of product sometimes, and money. And it all increases the variability that we need to deal with. So what can we do going forward to steady our supply chain? And what are the risks? So again, we need to understand what the risks are. The risks are to our market. Questions that you can ask is, how has our market changed? Has our market changed? How competitive am I still? And whatever has happened to me, has that happened as well to my competition? Because if we're all in this together, then actually relatively, I'm still as competitive as before. Do I need to look at an online market offering here? Because ultimately we can't meet, we can't shop. So is the online e-commerce market really another example of me to look at and to actually steady my business? From a product point of view, still so much unknown around the customs and tariffs, the licenses. But what you can do is secure your contracts with your suppliers, and make sure that the products that you have keep on quality products, that you keep on planning to get the right availability into your business, so you can make sure that you can address the demand of your customers. From a sourcing point of view, and this is where we focus a lot of our time on, we would ask you to do your review of your strategic suppliers. Who are the suppliers that are really impactful to your business, and how do you need to improve the relationship with them? The relationship, again, the trusted relationship with your core suppliers is key. No contract is going to actually safeguard that. It's the person to person. People buy from people and people sell to people. So that relationship with your core suppliers and also your core customers has become so important. Localization, again, globalization has kind of put the focus on the weakness of long-term supply chains. So what are the suppliers that we can locally engage with, that we can start a relationship with, and that we can safeguard, and we can protect actually the bigger contracts? Because ultimately contingency is more important in some cases than the cost or the margin or the profit that you achieve. And again, from a working together, it's all about collaboration. It's all about you and your first, second, third tier supply working together, strengthening your link, because delays will keep on happening. inventories will be impacted still. And from a logistics point of view, we need to really look at how we can focus on making sure that we have different modal transports. Think outside of the box, move back and see, this is what we currently do. What is the risk in my logistics supply chain? How can I bypass that? It's really finding new ways of getting the product to you or to your clients. Because again, we're all interlinked here. Northern Ireland and the south of Ireland definitely is interlinked, and they have their own specific challenges to deal with. But it's core that we fully appreciate and understand that all of this is intertwined, and we need to think back and look beyond. Contracts. What are our current contracts? The liabilities in our contracts, we need to review them and strengthen them. It really is your insurance policy for your worst case scenarios for the future. It's nearly like your prenup before you get married. What are the force majeure rules? What are your indemnities? What are your liabilities, your insurances, and rule of law and country of origin challenges? How is that made clear in your contract? We also have, or we're going to have to deal with regulatory divergence. So, and that's one of, I'm sure, on the agenda of multiple committees, because it's probably impacting industries in a different way. But all of this will create an increase of cost and complexity to produce for Irish businesses. And then ultimately, your own workforce. Make sure that you keep them agile, thinking with you, keep them involved. There might be a business case to be made that you go into a contingent workforce, and are currently, obviously, we're all remote. So these are things that we need to find solutions for to actually grow sustainably. And we are a chain of people. Do not forget that. We're all frustrated. We're all confused. Nobody has the right answer, but we're all in this together. So let's make the people chain the strongest chain, because ultimately it's impacting everybody. And when we collaborate, we can try to smoothen out the supply and demand curves. So how are we going to build back? Looking forward, and great examples heard today from Stephen, great example from Cathal. How are we going to build back better? There's different scenarios, but we would ask you to audit your market. What is happening in your market? Get knowledgeable again how your market has changed. And if your market hasn't changed, then maybe think outside of your box, innovate from within. Not only your product, but across your core drivers in the full supply chain. What can you do better, faster, smarter, cheaper? Don't forget that the EU Green Deal, which is coming fast and furious, it gives you great opportunity as well to relook at your business models, and it can give you questions to ask to rethink the basics of your business. Don't forget that. Now, digital and technology, it's a tool, but it's a fantastic tool at the moment. So go online, see what, from an information point of view, from a trading point of view, how it can improve your business, and lean out the process. Think back around the process. Select your partners right, your core partners, your strategy, and make sure that you keep those relationship tights and keep them local as well. I'm not saying do away with your partners in China, in Australia, in Thailand, but also look at backing up your products with more local Irish, European supply, and diversify your products or diversify your market. So from a supply point of view and from a demand point of view. Make sure you keep your workforce engaged. Look at your finances. Ultimately, it needs to make money. Your business needs to make money. Your own employees depend on your business to make money. And there is still a great business to be done. It's just in a different environment. Understanding how that environment can help you is a core. It's a core premises of building back better, because ultimately you need to fine tune your operations. So keep on monitoring your operations and keep on monitoring what you can do. So for me, get the visibility you need across the entire supply network. Stay agile. Rethink how you can do things, and again, the speed at what you can respond. We've all seen the speed that was and it was necessary, but that was able to bring the COVID vaccines online. Think outside of the box. Diversify your supplier base, diversify your production footprint, diversify your transportation partners, and then build your contingencies, because ultimately your business is your business. What you owe to your business is to build a contingency plans for worst case scenario. Right. So ultimately new business models can be considered. And I'm going back to, as I said, Declan from yesterday. We want people to think about new business models in the new world, linking it to a greener world, linking it to the EU Green Deal and our own national government absolutely promoting a more circular supply chain. So when you look at your own business model, we can be thinking about, am I doing a product business, or is it a service business? Because beyond the product, there's so many services you can provide, and it can be a full turnkey solution, and it can go back into your supply chain or forward to your customers. I just put the slide up just to, again, give you some options to look into what a circular economy, what a focus on a new business model might open up as opportunities for you to consider. And interestingly, time and time again, really innovative ideas appear right after a crisis. We're in a crisis at the moment, no doubt about it. But the crisis floods the market with people, skills, equipment, space, and it combines and recombines to create a flurry of innovation. Don't lose it. Hold on to that and bring it into your business. The failure of old business models might free up new ideas, and I'm quite excited to see what new businesses and products and services are going to be developed in the next few years on the back and out of the ashes of Brexit and out of the ashes of what COVID is doing to us now in the world. Look, there's so many stories, and we heard already a great few stories today. I'm just going to focus a little bit around the logistics side of things, because rerouting and bypassing the UK land bridge may be an option for you. And a lot of ports in Ireland and on the continent, in Holland, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, they all have ramped up and diversified their services. They all have built out their options in relation to the maritime, the land and the rail connectivity and through shipment options into the EU hinterland markets and other corners around the world. So they have been preparing themselves, and I want you to take opportunity of that to look into how they can work for you and your logistics. It might well be a saving grace for your business to avoid the capacity and the delay problems that we're seeing around the UK channel. It might not always be a solution, but it might be to some of your businesses from a time point of view, from a cost point of view, and from a resource point of view, that you're not stuck with administrative paperwork and additional costs. So really, your call to action, my call to your action, is push your own reset button for your world. Know what it means to your world. Stay close. Own your own product, own your information in your supply chain, own your own finances, and ultimately, this is the great reset. But eat the elephant in small little pieces. Stay in control of the change and stay in control of the information that is coming at us every day. There's still so many unknowns, and we need to try to know as much as we can. So keep on working with your local LEOs, your local enterprise offices, Small Firms Association, ISME, any help that the government is offering you. And there's a lot of help out there. So maintain that Brexit readiness attitude across your business. Communicate, be clear, and reach out to your suppliers, reach out to your customers, make a list of all the things that are risky to you and try to tick them off one at a time, and keep on monitoring your markets, because there is good news on the horizon. There are new business models and there's great opportunities, as Steve already has outlined, as Cathal has shown. So I would just say last words: be brave, be relentless, and be notorious. And so I wish you all very well, and thank you for your time and for me allowing me to be here today.
Ingrid in West Cork, 12 points right back at you from beautiful Donegal. What a mine of information and fantastic advice from you there. Lots of really interesting examples of what people should do, the importance of stress testing their supply chains and having contingency plans, the vital role that information plays. And I suppose the scary thing in a way you were chatting about was that there's still so many unknowns out there, and that we're going to be dealing with the ripple effect for quite some time. But again, like our other speakers, it was great that you ended on a positive note, and I love your image of the people chain building back after the challenges of Brexit and COVID, like what a melting pot of challenges for businesses at the moment. So look, we're moving on now to a short question and answer session. We're joined by 3 of our speakers. Unfortunately, Tony had to leave us, but you know where you can find him, on the RTE News. And don't forget, he does a great piece almost every weekend about the latest in Brexit, and you can read that on the website. And, fantastic information available from Tony all the time on the news. But taking the hot seat over from Tony is our own Michael Tunney, the head of enterprise here at Donegal Leo. And I know many of you have been sending in questions as the speakers have been talking throughout the morning, and some of those questions have already been responded to by the Leo team here in Letterkenny. But they've picked out a few questions, I think one for maybe each of the panellists there, which might have a general appeal to people. They might help inform everybody that's listening out there. So let's go straight to the first one. I think we've everyone there. We've Steve, we've Cathal, we've Ingrid, and we've Michael ready to take your questions. The first question we have is directed at Steve, and it comes from Bridget Collins, who runs Tots Amazing. That's an online baby goods and maternity activewear business, and they receive the bulk of their products from the UK. But since Brexit, the supply chain has been broken, and several of their suppliers have problems with couriers getting their goods through customs. So Bridget has 2 questions. Are some countries better or easier to deal with than others? And how difficult is it to get wholesalers, drop shippers in Europe to develop to Ireland? Steve, will you take that, please?
Yeah, thanks for that, Eileen. I'm assuming these are goods which are not necessarily manufactured in GB, that they may already be imported. So if you were then to look at European countries, I think the first thing you would have to do is to qualify their interest in supplying the Irish market. We've actually spoken to various companies in various countries, and it really has to be part of their strategy where they say, yes, we're interested in developing that particular market rather than just maybe some sporadic trade. Probably need to identify whether they already are tied up or whether their principal who is supplying them, assuming they're a wholesaler, is already tied in that market. We came across that recently with a lawnmower project. Same principles, just different market. So it's all to do with the origin of the goods, whether they're interested in developing the market, and probably a little bit about the size of the opportunity, the size of the pie. Are they going to be interested if it's going to be, palletized business or larger? So what we had to do with the flour project and with the condensed milk project, we actually had to sell the opportunity to the producer in terms of the scale of the company that they would be supplying, that we developed their level of interest and the opportunity. You don't want people to put it in the too hard basket once they see there's going to be complications in terms of supplying that particular market. So we need to smooth out that as much as possible as well. I'm happy to speak to the lady behind the business, so I can catch her name later to get a little bit more information. Are there companies or countries which are easier to do business with? Yes, it does become quite personal as to who the people are. It depends on language, depends on communication. Again, I need to know maybe a little bit more about the goods. Again, it's a question of mapping out who would be the potential suppliers, approach them, find out if they're interested, and just sending out emails, for example, to people in general, you're not necessarily going to get replies, but actually creating a database, working through it, contacting people, selling them the opportunity. So if you have strong distribution throughout the Irish marketplace, I think you'd be in a very good position to be able to bring on new suppliers of similar products from Europe. I hope that part answers some of your questions.
Thanks, Steve, and it's very kind of you to offer to engage with Bridget afterwards. That's much appreciated. The next question is for Cathal. Would you say your organisation's internal drive for growth is driving your business forward in spite of the challenges that are facing you, Cathal? Oh, Cathal, you're muted.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry. Get the question.
I did, yeah, I did.
Grand,
most definitely. I mean, Brexit, COVID, they're just challenges that all businesses face, and it's just a part of doing business. But I mean, in terms of our drive, we have to grow, because in the absence of growth, something like COVID, when we lose half our turnover, had we not continued to grow over the last 5 years, that could have closed the doors on us. But so with growth, generate profits. All of that does, what that does is it helps protect and insulate the business from shocks like COVID. Brexit, as I say, it's just a challenge to how we do work. How we work. There's processes. People have been exporting. Business have been exporting forever. The mechanisms, the processes, the software. They're all in place. It's just a matter of understanding them, leveraging them, and continuing on the path. We're committed to continue on the path of growth that we've just completed a significant capital investment. Where we doubled the capacity of the site here. So we're intent on filling that and taking and strengthening the business. So and again, by doing that, we secure the employment of the people and our place in the local community. So yes, it is in spite of. It's always in spite of challenges. Challenges are there to try and impinge on your growth, and it's just a matter of working through them and around them or over them.
Okay, brilliant. The next question is directed at Steve or Ingrid. Don't fight over it now. It comes from Thomas Cullen. So Thomas is saying that all the presentations have been focused on goods, but he's an SME with a new project called Sherpa, which is an internationally traded service. And Thomas is currently about to commence a marketing campaign in the Manchester area of the UK. So he's wondering, how does Brexit affect his business opportunity in the UK market, and what issues do you think he'll be facing?
Well, so from my point of view, as he has no product, he has a service and he has an intellectual property, as I understand it. He will need to fully understand how he can secure himself, what that means from an IPR contractual, the legal clauses on the one hand, if he's going to have resources in the UK, how is that impacting his own business? If he's starting a campaign in Manchester, from an information point of view, again, is it going to be online? Is it going to be providing services on the ground? There's different elements to the answer, I suppose. But while the product is not visible because it's a service, there are still similar questions to be answered and similar challenges to be addressed. Steve, you might have some more on this.
I think that's been very well answered, Ingrid, and probably my specialty is more into the EU market. We don't see those barriers necessarily for companies into the EU market. Again, depending on, I think it's training, for example, language could potentially be an issue. We have actually partnered a cybersecurity trainer, for example, in one of the Benelux markets. Not directly to end customers, which is what they actually wanted to do, but to colleague trainers who then bring him in on certain projects. So maybe there's an opportunity there to partner up with existing companies to extend their portfolio of services as well. But no, I think that's been well answered, Ingrid.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And back to Ingrid, actually, this next question is directly for you, Ingrid. Somebody is asking about purchasing from the UK. They're saying they're purchasing materials from the UK that they use to produce their product. As a business, what returns to customs and revenue do we need to make?
Oh, that has more to do with the customs itself. So I wouldn't be the perfect person now to be or advising on that. That is very much specific in relation to logistics. So I'm sorry. If you want, I can find out, or otherwise maybe one of our other panelists can answer that, but specifically I wouldn't know around the customs that they need to put in place.
Okay, well, I know the Leo office here has been working a lot with people on those sort of things, so maybe Michael could refer to that, or maybe we can give some information to that person through various links afterwards. Actually, Michael, I think that the last question is for you, so if you want to pick up on that one. But also there's another question here. Are there contacts who can assist companies to avail of any aids that are available to strengthen their businesses owing to issues posed by Brexit, please?
Yes, I was going to cover that just when finishing up this morning, but the prior question, yes, on an ongoing basis, the local enterprise offices, ourselves in Donegal, but also throughout the country, are running the customs training. So in relation to what customs documentation is required, obviously that person has to be registered with the revenue, etc., get their registration number. But the detail of that is something that they need to look into, and either they do it internally or they get a customs agent. But again, if they're not going through the UK, then that's not an issue. But I mean, there is one coming up this month, I think it is, and we have one a month happening. So I would suggest look at our website, localenterprise.ie/Donegal, and register for the customs training. And then there's other more detailed customs training available under SkillNets and others. In relation to the general range of supports, as I say, I'll maybe just cover those formally, maybe, Eileen, when I'm wrapping up, because there's quite a number of them.
Okay, great. Well, look, we're coming to the end now, and regarding any other requests for information and links, the Leo here will send out a list of web links to all of you who've been good enough to attend, and you'll be able to find relevant information on Brexit-related issues on those links that you'll all get after this presentation. But as I say, we're about to wrap up and we're handing back to Michael Tunney. Michael, the head of enterprise here at Leo in Donegal, and he's going to kind of wrap it all up for you and also talk maybe a little bit about the next steps.
Thank you, Aileen, and thank you all very much for listening in this morning. I was just thinking when we were talking, whenever the Brexit vote happened, we, a few months later, were planning, and we went out on a trade mission with our colleagues in Derry City and Strabane District Council to the east coast of the States. And when we arrived there in November, they just voted in their ex-president now, Mr. Trump. So they had we were concerned that they had all these questions around Brexit, but really all the talk was about the uncertainty around the Trump regime. And at that stage, a lot of people were saying, no, he'll temper, he won't be what he was in the election campaign. But 4 years later, Brexit is now a reality. He's now ex-President Trump. God knows what he will be in the future, will he be president again. But I think Brexit, we have spent 4 years Brexit gestation. We've heard this morning that Brexit is now very much a reality, and Cathal, I think, hammered that home in the context of a business that's right on the border in Donegal and the difficulties, particularly in the food sector, that it is going to cause. And I think he described it an unmitigated disaster. And also something Ingrid was saying there, for some reason, Ingrid, you made a comment there, I think what it was about, this Brexit happened and this is what happens. I was thinking of the film, the Choir, French film, and the headmasters talks about action, reaction, and I think unfortunately in Europe, there's a lot of, and across the world, politics has gone action, reaction, as opposed to compromise to cooperate. So I think Brexit is very much, Britain wanted, Britain got, and we all are going to have to live with it and suck it up, unfortunately. Let's say we've been working in the local enterprise offices, but also I think the Irish government and all of the support agencies and trying to help business prepare for Brexit. And now it's about helping them, I suppose, to live with Brexit and overcome some of those teething problems. And thankfully, to date, in the local enterprise office in Donegal, we haven't got too many inquiries or sort of urgent calls from clients saying, can you help us with this? Maybe because there was a lot of work done. And there are a lot of supports available through local enterprise offices, Enterprise Ireland, Intertrade Ireland, even Chambers of Commerce at local level, and a host of government agencies and departments. Specifically in the local enterprise office, we've tailored some of our supports or previous mentoring. It's now there available 100% subvented. So if you have a particular query around Brexit or a challenge around Brexit you need support with, we can apply some mentoring there and get a suitable Brexit mentor in there. As I mentioned, we're doing customs training on an ongoing basis, not only through ourselves, but through the likes of SkillNets. And tied into that, there is support from Enterprise Ireland, both for Enterprise Ireland clients and local enterprise office core clients, for grant aiding staff dealing directly with customs, and also some of maybe the hardware costs associated with that, up to 9,000 per staff engaged in a whole-time or part-time in customs training. In the border counties in particular, there's a new suite of border Brexit programs covering things like financial management, innovation, exporting, financial management, and a particular program for the retail sector. Again, specifically within I suppose, taking cognizance of the location of the 6 border counties, and always has been that because we're always been close to the border and because there always was the differential currencies there and the differences in currencies, retail was highlighted as a sector that needed specific interventions. And I mentioned in particular there the exporting. I think 4 years ago, whenever Brexit happened, a lot of people were saying, and me being one of them, that probably that was a time where Irish businesses, particularly our micro enterprises, needed to start looking more beyond the UK and Great Britain for their exports. It's been a slow process, so I think it's been a change in mindset, but I think there's now a growing emphasis, and particularly OECD did a report there in October 2019, highlighting the limited activity that small and micro enterprises in Ireland had in the export market, and so there's a greater focus now on that. So Brexit has become now an export focus for the local enterprise offices, and it's going to be a significant drive to us getting more of our clients to be looking at export opportunities. But again, in the context of something that Stephen was saying, and in particular, was that the need for market knowledge, and that's probably where a lot of micro enterprises and small businesses, where the gap is that knowing where you want to go and what's the market you're going into and what do you need to do to get into that market. And that's probably a challenge for a lot of small or micro enterprises. And one maybe that additional supports need to be put in place. But in that context, there is a small grant scheme called Technical Assistance for Micro Exporters. So if you are a small business or a micro enterprise and you want to put your toe in the water in a Dutch market or a German market or the Finnish market or wherever it's going to be, you can avail of 50% grant support up to €2,500 to do that, whether that's to attend a virtual online session or a Meet the Buyer event, or to get somebody to do a bit of market research. That's available too. And then in addition to that, is again, has been mentioned, this, the movement to online. There is and has been for quite some time the training online vouchers, again, to assist small business to go online. And I think at times a lot of business, when they go online and they make the sales, they forget the same kind of market knowledge is really required if you're going to go online as you are than compared to when you're going physically in the market. A lot of them think because I've sold our product now to somebody in Australia, I'm now exporting to Australia. They've made a sale into Australia. So it's a different mindset if you're going to do it rigorously and really add significantly to your online sales within your business. Then, there are loan schemes for Microfinance Ireland for if you're affected by Brexit, and also there's the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland have unsecured loans from 25,000 up to $500,000, again in the context of Brexit and response to Brexit. So you want to invest. Specifically then, I just want to put in the context of the local enterprise office here in Donegal, but also the network. We're involved in the Enterprise Europe Network. That's a European funded program. Our partners in there, Enterprise Ireland, who are the lead partner, ourselves in Donegal on behalf of the 31 local enterprise offices and the Chambers of Commerce in Cork and Dublin. I'm delighted to see Margaret from Cork was on this morning on this session. So I suggest to people to go and look at the EEN website. That's www.een-ireland.ie. So specifically there, EEN is it's a network of, and we talked there about earlier on about the network of and networking within businesses and across countries and have people on the ground. There's some 600 plus agencies across 60 countries. Initially started out European focus, but now it's international focus. And those agencies, such as the local enterprise office in Donegal or an economic or enterprise development agency, whatever country you're going to, they act as kind of the honest brokers to help companies and to get, I suppose, make the contact as well in relation to if you're partnering with a company. So we were partnering with a company in Donegal, wanting to partner with a company in, let's say, Portugal. We would contact the EEN partner there, and they would do that verification for us and to say, yeah, this is a commercially viable, reputable company, and we can now introduce them. But I think go to the website. There's 3 areas there I would highlight. There's partner profiles. So if you're a company in Donegal and you want to sell a product or you're looking for a distributor wherever, you put your profile up anonymously. Third party, and whenever somebody responds, that's where the EEN intermediaries then do that little bit of verification, and then the companies are introduced. Or indeed, if you're looking for a business idea, I think there's about 5,500 opportunities up there on the website at the moment. You can see, so you might find, German company X looking for a distributor to do X and Y. I'm getting here, time to roll it up, nearly there. Also, there's access to market information. We talked about it earlier, so that's available. And also then there's a range of business-to-business brokerage events. And I would just highlight 2. We in the local enterprise offices are organising 2 national events upcoming. One in April, it's an engineering Meet the Buyer event. At the moment, I think there's companies from 8 countries across Europe and some 60 firms already signed up. And then there's a food event in June, on the 9th of June. And again, already there's 8 firms from 13 European countries signed up to that. So again, if you're a small company and you're looking at want to maybe develop opportunities into European markets, and even if it's only to find out what buyers are looking for, because it's good to do that homework, as Steve was talking about, and I think Cathal is doing it all the time. So that's the range of supports. I would say, I suppose the first point of contact at local level, whatever county you're in, is your local enterprise office, but also use the EEN Ireland. Again, that's through the local enterprise office and through the Chambers of Commerce and Enterprise Ireland. And just lastly, before I finish, I'd like to thank our speakers this morning on behalf of the local enterprise office, Tommy, Ingrid, Steve and Cathal. I think it's been very, very insightful. It shows that actually there's still Brexit is still a journey we're all on, and hopefully it'll be a sort of a smooth surface, so we will know the track in the next 12 months. And I would just highlight there'll be 2 events during Enterprise Week in our own calendar. One is Recipes for Successful Startups tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. And then we talked about it earlier on. It was kind of a theme coming through. 2 themes. One was collaboration innovation. So our our last session on this week as part of Veterinary Week is Friday morning. It's about collaborating to innovate. So again, if you're online and you're interested in those two topics, have a look at those. So thank you very much, and hang you back to Eileen.
Thanks, Michael. And Ivan was on the verge of going in the door again there to shove him out of the seat. He didn't respond the first time to wrap up, but still loads more information in there from Michael, and plenty more information available through the Leo office here in Letterkenny. And it's just for me now to just again say thanks so much to all of you for joining us from all around Donegal and around the country. I hope you found it very informative. Thanks to AVC, the company that provided the technology to make it all happen, and it happened really smoothly. Fair play to them. Thanks to our panelists, and I want to just show you something here that's going to be sent out to all our panelists. It's called the Donegal Bucket List. It's a lovely piece of art and a prompt from Donegal artist Laura Buchanan, and it just gives you some ideas of the fantastic things you can do here in Donegal. So it goes Glenveigh, Killybegs, loads of different places, something to do every month, every day. So I hope that our panelists, Steve, Tony, Cathal and Ingrid, at some stage in the near future will be able to actually act on this and travel up to Donegal and see and enjoy this beautiful county. In the meantime, goodbye to all of you and take care. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks.